What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here today. I'm super excited to have the opportunity here to do another collab, this time with your boy.
Yeah, so what's up, guys? Devlin Cassidy, aka the Scholar, and I guess we're here today to talk about the Card Fight Vanguard meta. We know that October just wrapped up, but I'm really thankful for Commander Jaime to bring me on because I love talking about this game and the results.
Absolutely, man. It's a pleasure to have you on the channel too as well. And if you guys haven't checked his channel out, definitely check out. He has really good content, and he also recently did like Premium 101, and that's a massive video, but I highly recommend checking it out on the parts you're interested. A lot of good deck lists that you can really play with too. So quick shout out for you for that.
Absolutely, and more episodes on the way on that. If you're still trying to get into that Eternal format, we are going over now the basics and stuff. Once I get time to record those are going to be coming out too. So for sure, check them out.
Awesome. Super excited, my man. So we're going to dive into standard first. And one of the biggest things that we noticed was in the Netherlands. And so with this specifically, we had set 12 come out and also the deck sets for like Orphis, for example, and a few others. But this one specifically, we started seeing the top 8 change from Wallista to Gandiva to like now including other decks such as Greedon, Mass Gases, for example. And the deck's fun. It's a lot of restanding shenanigans, but like it's a lot less cost effective, or more cost effective, I should say. Takes advantage of Persona writing with the Hydreigon ability too, if you need to be going second. A lot of good cards to go with it. Anything you want to share on like on Greedon specifically, Devlin?
Nothing really particularly on Greedon. Those that know me personally, I don't play standard as much as I should, because for my main thing this year for the competitive season is I was really focused on V and Premium, since the two that I were going to attend were split between just Premium and V on the other days was what I was planning to go toward.
No, I understand, because like you can only play so much.
Exactly.
You got to prioritize at that point, and that's okay if
sure.
you don't have any points on that in that respect too. So.
It's interesting though. I wonder how much for the Ava, because Ava is what I play for standard, and then so it's just kind of interesting to see with the set 11 support that it's still kind of able to keep up, because a lot of people on my side really predicted that. Sure, the new Ava support like makes the deck better, but I don't necessarily know if it keeps up with the creep from like the other decks that are still getting supported. And then like Gandiva and Wallista still being mainstays in the standard format. Does it continue to stay around? But it's interesting that there has been a decline of Wallista and Gandiva, and you're seeing more of like these like Vanguard centric decks that are going to be able to like restand between like Minerva and Greedon and a bunch of other people. So it's been pretty interesting to see that we're taking a shift now to more of just like a beefier middle column with just more consistent like draw power in terms of just like you're able to play a really conservative game plan.
Yeah, especially if you see crits and drive checks too. Yeah, and Minerva is another good contender too, especially if you're able to get your hands on promos and stuff like that. The deck's pretty solid too. So if you don't necessarily want to play like Dark States, there's Keter Sanctuary in terms of Minerva as well. So let's dive into the next BCS. So the next following weekend that happened was Vietnam, and the reason that I wanted to point this out was because we're starting to see Orphis in the mix too. What's really cool about Orphis has been that like shadow arming token deck that people like to play. It enables multi-attack. You can make the tokens really big too, but it was just sometimes like it will lack advantage sometimes, but with the new supports, even more aggressive. It's even more like advantageous. Just more solid at that point too. Any thoughts on Orphis by chance, Devlin?
Orphis it has a really lot of like good aggro output. I know a lot of my friends' lists were talking more about kind of how they prefer like the consistency now too.
That's a big one.
The mask thing just really like propelled that deck to reach some certain thresholds that it had in the beginning, because you had a large issue where you would have to play a lot of set orders, and then it like neg your ability like to defend yourself, and then you're still kind of waiting to get to your grade like 3 turn into your Abyssal Dart deck to start like getting your stuff off. Now the deck kind of shifts to where it's like, okay, instead of always grabbing the grade 2 order that makes the Shadow Army, you're grabbing the grade 2 that draws you a card, so that way like once you get into your grade 3 turn, it's not like as slow as it is, because you're hitting really big numbers really fast, especially if you go second, because you're immediately be able to get that Persona right and everything off the mask. So the deck does what it wanted to do initially a lot better. It just gets you those hit like a truck numbers, and very consistently too. So I think that Bushiroad, while like we initially thought this was underwhelming, like once we started, I think like as a community playing with it, we figured out that this is one of the better mask units to come out for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think at reveal it was kind of awkward because instead of like adding orders to the set order zone, you were actually removing them.
Yeah.
So some people thought like that was kind of backwards, but it works out with the synergy with the other support that it got too.
And then also, yeah, the structure deck coming out too with the grade 2 for that deck too also helped fill some holes.
That's also true.
That it needs to use. So like overall, like they really helped oomph the deck where it needed to in terms of like the consistency pieces it needs.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like I used to play Orphis, like the old stuff before, and it kind of ran into the Zorga issue when if you had too many orders in hand, you really didn't have shield quality whatsoever. And so you would just kind of lose from there and take some damage. And if you didn't get any triggers in your damage zone, you're going to have a bad time, really, for that deck, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, too, like in general with Standard is that you really need to be seeing triggers like every turn. Like I think Kai from WCC did a video on like how triggers are actually like way more impactful because you're playing a smaller deck, so like you really need to be seeing those cards with the higher shield values because of those. We never got the we didn't keep the 10Ks from V. We kept the same trigger power, and then we also have all these triggers that gain the additional shield value. Like fronts are still played because of some of these mass decks just because of how big their numbers get early. So just being able to check triggers offensively for you to have them in hand or draw into them, and then check them defensively is really like makes Standard this very like trigger impactful game format that Vanguard has.
No, I definitely agree. And a lot of decks that take advantage of deck thinning to typically have a better chance of dealing with stuff. And then I think that's also another contributing factor for like the restanding decks such as Greedon, Minerva, and so on, because it's more chances to see triggers. And even before with the old school grade 4s like Serapure Light, like having triple drive is a big deal too on top of that.
Especially Ava too, being able to like pinpoint. We see that gets in there again, in that top cut pie chart along with Greedon too. So we're beginning to see consistent patterns again of what stays. Interesting, no Will Lista though for me for Vietnam, and that Jet took a slot over that just because Will Lista was seen like as the last deck between like Gondiva and it to like kind of gatekeep Jet out of the format, especially if those decks go first. Since this is best of one, like it really does matter. But you're just really able to make the Jet player uncomfortable because they don't really get any high value unless they open like GG Gungram, since it was choice restricted with Swirler. Right. So like that. So I mean that's kind of like where I'm at. So I just find that pretty interesting. Of course, like RNG is a factor, but having Jet be the sneak in and seeing no well list is pretty interesting to me from the Vietnam standpoint.
Yeah, and there's other BCSs that have like different distributions too. So you may not see like Willista here, but there's maybe Willista in a different top 8, which we've seen too. It's starting to shift more to the new Mascot support for sure. So I think we can wrap up Standard and then move on to the next format. Now into V Premium, and I know you had mentioned that you prepped for this meta game. Is there anything you want to start us off, at least with Vancouver?
So V is still, I still think it's in this really weird position because we're lacking like those clan collection supports, which those really impacted premium more, but you were getting grade 2s and things like in those sets that were actually still changing like the overall like better V bosses. Right. Enterana's hit like doesn't make Steam Maidens as prevalent, which is kind of like ironic because we see one on the pie chart, but like at the same time though, like Luard's still seen as the boogeyman, but we've also seen like tons of distributions of where like it doesn't top. And so this is kind of like led to believe it's like where people are really looking at like Thavis and Anj as kind of like the best decks with like Night Rose. So like any real like blue deck you play for V, you have a pretty good odds of topping if you're playing like the optimized builds and such. And then you kind of have like your even from this pie chart alone, you kind of get a good idea of like what decks try to aim to do what. You have your really high consistency tools like Thavis, Anj, and Night Rose, which I think are all like your some of your best picks, with like Luard being an outlier. Personally, for me, I played Leopold because Leopold has this huge surprise factor where like they can just straight up high roll you out of the game. I just had to have like some of my opponents like seriously just had to scoop because especially with the new Jumbuck promo, you can just blow up their board, and if those pieces are like setup pieces that they need to go into their grade 3 turn and then they miss their grade 3, like they're just like so behind, like it's not really that worth.
Those bodies, for
sure. And then also like Astropode still is relevant because like Valkyrion high roll can still just hit like a truck if you hit another Valkyrion off the top 5. So there's a lot of surprise decks, just with having that high roll surprise factor that V kind of has initially. But yeah, I mean, V is pretty diverse though now. Thankfully, we're not seeing like the 5 to 6 like topping one deck,
like
and it's dwindled. Yeah, it's dwindled back down now to where there's some diversity and different distribution initially just going into V premium.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons you hit, actually, the reason that I pointed this one out is because all the blue clans show representation. And as you notice over October as well, you started seeing not only Favas and Ange, but also now Night Rose into the mix. And it's mainly because it also got its V promo. The consistency went up. I actually just published a video on the deck profile too that shows even more extension of attacks. So you can have 7 attacks with 4 of them being Skull Dragons still.
Yeah, it's
pretty nutty.
Yeah.
So it's not just coincidence, but as some of these clans are still getting their V promos, it sometimes it's just enough for them to get into top 8. And so that's really what I wanted to point this out.
For sure. And I definitely think we're going to see Ons now more too, because now it's just not like they get their multi-attack off the Ons column. Now they're getting it off their new grade 2 promo as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, just overall, a lot of these promos that are like the extent their attack extenders are just really high value in the clans that got put in because of what their V bosses aim to do. Yeah, between like the granblue one and the Bermuda Triangle one, those were absolutely insane for the clan, as well as Aqua Forces. Repress Strike, having you have a restanding Vanguard potentially on the grade 2 turn is also crazy. So just overall, those blue clans are in a phenomenal spot right now based off the support they have gotten.
Yeah, all their V promos are good, like for them. For real, now that you
yeah, absolutely.
They all do what they need to do in their clan.
Exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. Let me share the other pie charts. So speaking of Ange and Bermuda Triangle, Vietnam decided to have 4 tops within the top 8 of just pure Ange. And it's only probably gonna, what's the word I'm looking for? I wouldn't say stabilize, but it's gonna still see representation even with the V promo.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's also cool about this distribution is that it has other unique decks like Spectral Duke. It has the Malkov from Angel Feather. That one I really liked facing. I faced it in Bro earlier this year, and it focuses on Protect 2. It focuses on numbers and also some guard restriction and protection from retirement effects. It has a little bit of everything, and it's not what you would expect from Angel Feather as much too.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really weird seeing like these old V decks that have always been like really good rogue picks also like sneak in there, and then it's like Ange is like the only defined like meta deck. But you see this a lot though too in a lot of like the Australia, Asia area BCSs, of where you just get like these really like kind of like out of left field picks that do convert. Right. But like overall, yeah, the Ange makes a lot of sense. Malkuth Milik to me also makes like some sense as well. I think we'll also see Gears come back once they get their promo as well, because their promo is very good in V, as well as like insanely good in premium. But yeah, and then like Gold's promo is also good too. So like once that gets like it goes. So
we're still waiting that on the English side, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know they're trying to reveal the promos, but like English still has to catch up essentially before it even sees like differences in metagames, like in this case.
For sure.
So it makes sense. So the last BCS that I want to highlight for V Premium was Spain, and it just solidifies more that even a weekend later, they're still blue clans.
Yep.
So I guess October was the month of blue clans, and I mean we still some of like Royal Paladin or Gurguit and Gold Paladins, and then also see Norakami here and there too. But I think besides that, there's not really much else to say unless you have any remaining thoughts.
I mean, I just still kind of think it's crazy that Vanquisher is still relevant. What? I think 4 years now. 4 years now removed from set 12 of last. So the deck, if it sees, it goes, because Jaggy Shot's an insane card.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, just all of these two, though, too, like
just in general too.
Yeah, it's really strong. Jewel Knights, I think, is a sleeper pick too. I think these last 3 decks honestly are sleeper picks for people that are like on the fringe. Like again, like the high roll that I talked about for the high roll factor is the same that it was included for Astral Poets and for Leopold.
Yeah.
That is, you just get these insane high roll factors, and you just put your opponent like such on the back foot. And like Gurgit's extension can be crazy, even though like they don't have Percival and V. Like it's just still pretty wild. So like overall, like
more now too.
Yeah,
like great too. Yeah,
like their 3 is just very like those 3 make sense to me. Like they're not like as crazy as like to me like as a Duke or like a Malkuth. Like those because these last 3 that fell in the pie chart like make a lot of sense to me in terms for like how V's top decks fare against like those picks.
I gotcha. And I feel like certain decks, like you said, the Malkuth, and then maybe like a deck like Astro Poets, those are pilots that I think that really enjoy that deck, and they also are confident in their ability to do well with it too in an event too. So I think that's a contributing factor to even like convert to top 8, like you said
right.
too.
Absolutely.
So definitely. Awesome. So going into premium, and so we'll start off with Malaysia. And what we've seen with the September meta game, we see representation with Narukami, with Chaos Breaker, like these type of oppressive control decks too. But there's always been that one deck that we've kind of been wanting to be banned or hit or in some fashion, and that's the mill deck. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this might be the first top 8 with the mill deck, and that's the Malista deck. Do you have any thoughts on that by chance, Devlin?
No. So the first top was with Alec Goff. He got 4th with it in White Plains for Malista. But this was the other one like out of the outside that we first like saw. I know I was wrong in terms of like the Weddle hit, but like Murtoa needs to go. And it's not so much the problem as like the deck can do this because if the game goes on long enough, Mega Colony can do the same thing. Can just make your opponent draw their deck out. The problem though is that you're doing it in the main phase and you're able to do it like an infinite amount of times until your opponent decks out, because you're always going to fill cards out in the deck, like with the Malista variant, like specifically because you're playing the grade 1 duo that resets itself along with like the Weddle and Murtoa. Like my homie Connor Centro like did a whole video on Vanguardians explaining exactly how the combo worked. So, I mean, and that's just the issue, is that the deck, because of the gems and everything, just turbo gasses this entire deck out to hit the 2, and then you manipulate your bottom of your deck to where it's the Weddle and the grade 1, and then you just kind of go, which is kind of the problem. And since it's only placing, you only really get 2 ways to beat it, and that's with Chaos Breaker for double. They have to see two Zirconium and give you 2 Counterblasts, which the Malista deck never swings because they're playing like 11 draw triggers and an OT. So their defensive checks are just going to be drawing cards. And then that, like on top of that, then Gridora, grade 3 Gridora can lock out two columns because they need 4 rearguard circles to play, but those are just really fringe situations, which like you're never getting the double Zirconium for chaos and stuff like that. So it being in the main phase, so you can't G-guard or do anything to it. Like it's really toxic. So that's kind of like the main problem with that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the coffin at that point too, for sure. And there's another variant of it, which I'll highlight next. Going on to BCS Sydney, we saw another variant of the mill deck. No Loki pun intended.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a different way. Turn 4, ideally, at this point, but it still falls back into like generic Bermuda support, essentially. But we saw 2 tops in here, and we still see a little bit of diversity for the rest of the top 8, which is still good in my eyes still.
Yeah, like honestly, minus like Narukami's relevancy and like Chaos just being a really good pick into Eradicators, and Melissa, of course. Premium's honestly pretty diverse. I think Fuzzy Paradox is the whole chart breakdown. Like once you start getting to other, like you start like trickling down pretty fast once you leave the Chaos Breaker part, because we're seeing a rise like even already that probably won't be covered in this results, but like the fact that like Nectar is rising, you always kind of have that Friends Die Liner in there that you're able to get to. I thought this result was actually really cool, seeing Susanoo and Nubatama come in, because for Sydney, I know for sure the Nubatama player got second. So just having Dominate kind of be around without like the premium deck set or anything, I just think is really cool, because I think that was a sleeper anyway. And I'm really glad they got rid of the bird before going in for this format. But yeah, just overall, like premium is pretty diverse once you kind of leave the top three, because a lot of things can still compete. It's just like you have these three like gatekeeping decks, which is one is a really good pick into what I'd say is the best deck of the format in Narukami, and then just Millista is just one of those decks like if it's its day, it's winning the event.
Right, absolutely. And I know for the new Watama player, Uber, he's active in the new Watama group, so all of us were like super proud of him. And he also won in standard with the Megalomasuchi, if that's how you pronounce the snake.
The snake, yeah.
So it was kind of like the essence of New Vatama too, but in standard before we get this deck set too. So I like these different decks too, like you mentioned too. Like outside of the Chaos Breaker decks, you said like there's more of a diversity there at that point, which is really good. Going on to BCS Spain, and so guess who's back? Chaos Breaker.
Really good deck.
But another mill deck as well. But we're still seeing like the Neo Nectar, or we're starting to see the Neo Nectar representation at this point too. And I believe in this one, it was a Katrina based deck with Asha in the mix. And what's interesting about this deck too, it had like damage inflictors, and I think there was some synergy where you would do it on your opponent's battle phase after you doing the Megalonoma stride, so you can purposely end the turn by going to 7 damage. So I don't know how it worked out for that player, but they actually won the whole event too. So the Katrina played out first.
Yeah, so like actually in that list too, because I've seen that now a couple times, because he's ended up topping other events now, like as well, like as more with more recent results. So you essentially, and the cool thing with the Megaloma thing too is, so like Megaloma was like kind of designed like as a fair card, but it was viewed as bad because you don't want to like have no hand and like put yourself to 5 damage. With those damage inflictors, you'll go to you'll put yourself to 6 with a damage inflictor with a call off Rain Breath, and then you'll go down to 4 because that removal effect lingers at the end of the turn.
Yes, it does.
Which is, I've also like tried to play around with that in Great Nature. Just the better one was with Spangled, where you deck yourself out and then you'd have those remaining auto abilities for the draws you had to resolve. So then you would like end with cards in hand. So like Megaloma can do some weird things. I've personally been testing it because I think like Katrina out of the Green Clan, since that's what all I play for premium, is kind of like low key the best pick. In terms of like if you dodge Mega Colony in your first like 3 rounds of Swiss, you should be good to go. It's kind of that same like granblue ideology aspect of where, cool, if I dodge Gridora the first 3 rounds, I'll probably top if I know how to pilot against everything else. That
makes sense. Yeah, Katrina's big too. Like literally since it came off the ban list, it's been carrying Neo Nectar. For real. It
0 to hero.
Literally for every variant, you see like Musketeers, you see like Asha, you see what's the other one? Inez. Yeah. So like
Inez,
they just focus on Katrina. Those tokens just get so big, and you can only guard so much. And if you're a clan that doesn't have great G guards, then you're gonna take some hits too. And that's pain from Aquaphor, so we need better G guards. But so I feel that in that sense too. Let me go into the next BCS. Also, that same weekend we have Myanmar, if that's how you pronounce it. This one had a lot more diverse, but it also had very unique decks. And I'm talking about like Blau, I'm talking about Eugene. Even Tsukiyomi was not expected.
Yasuye is my hype pick out of this graph.
Yes. I was like, finally. I don't know if it's had a top yet, but I'm like, finally, it's good to see it as well. It's a really strong history collection deck, too, as well. And those that don't know, the Eugene deck, obviously you play Eugene for the name, and there's this grade 1 booster that restands your Vanguard, regardless if it's a stride. And then, of course, in Premium, you play stand triggers. So you can restand your booster and you can do it again, essentially. It's not a once per turn, so it can be pretty nutty, especially if your Vanguard has crit. On top of that. Anything else you want to say?
I mean, yeah, it's pretty diverse. Again, you see these like really like left out of field when you go to the Australia, Southeast Asia regions for your BCSs, but overall, like this actually looks like a lot of fun to like participate in.
It does,
because I mean, I like seeing diverse stuff, because then it's like, oh, cool, like you get to see like a lot of different decks, and like just have a good time playing. But yeah, again, my big pick is Yasuye, because like I think we'll cover it in the next one, but it was like Yasuye and Victor were like the big boogeymen for us, especially at KSC in terms of testing, because we were like, okay, I think we need Hanali in our decks because those decks can just like really just go off if they go first. And then their follow-up also is just very strong. So like if they see both like really good turns back to back, you're kind of just dead without it. So seeing Yasuye finally get his credit, seeing of course more granblue because I think that deck's cracked, and then seeing spikes for a second time is kind of interesting too. And then Blau finally coming about as one of the first Nova Grappler tops is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I know we saw a Victor top. I can't remember which BCS, but we saw Victor also topping in Canada.
Yeah, it was in Vancouver. Was it Vancouver? Yeah, Vancouver for British Columbia.
Or Richmond, Vancouver.
Richmond. One of the two. Shout out Sergio. He went to both.
That too. And then it was Stephen Lee.
Stephen Lee is the one because he went back to back in standard and premium.
Yeah.
For that weekend.
Phenomenal player. That too. Awesome. And so just to wrap up for today, we have Vietnam. And I wanted to point this out because there's diversity within a clan itself too. And I think this is kind of like more of your territory since it's Mega Colony. Do you want to elaborate maybe like Flagberg and maybe Darkface specifically?
For sure. So when I was in White Plains, I guess now since I met him, I could call him a friend. A friend of mine from Team Ham was on the Flag Colony variant of Mega Colony, where you slide Kevin. In like Kevin, from 1 to 2 dark faces just to have access to that history collection.
Yeah.
So your top end and your draw is a little better once you get to your like Flagberg, especially with Persona Ride. Because that was the strength of where Order Colony was at, is because Mega Colony as a whole's numbers suck. So like with Megalantis, ours like pseudo gets better just because our opponents are getting like lower, so they have to guard with more.
Yes.
But the Persona Ride and the free restand, it's actually pretty big that they get access to Inlet Pulse's first skill just to be able to restand. So then they can do like up to like 6 attacks and different things like that, where they just add the one more is actually just pretty huge. In terms of, especially if you're able to get like the double Megalantis off and just neck power down. But one thing with this though is it loses its consistency and it's really counterblast heavy. So
it really is.
There's a weird thing against like really seasoned like players that really know how to play in a Mega Colony from the jump, where they can just really hard deny you, and so they can map you, because what you want to be doing is you want to be using a counterblast for Ghidorah and then a counterblast or 2 counterblasts for Megalantis, which one of that can be refunded off of your high class Moth.
Yep.
And so the problem then is you kind of lose out on your like your grade 2 restander inside Flagberg, because then you're just going to be taxing yourself out, and then like where your kill turn could be is not as strong. So then you're like relying into more of just like the standard Ghidorah, call a rear guard, swing with the other rear guard, call the grade 3 from deck, restand the other with the Hell Demise. That's kind of like where you sit at. But the Persona Ride overall is like the real appeal to this deck if you aren't trying to go like for the more harder control, like with the Darkface template inside it, is where I can speak for Mega Colony on that.
I saw one of the deck lists too. Like what's really cool about Flagberg, early on, even in standard, it had a counterblast issue if you weren't too careful with it. But they also got a grade 2 in Eric's that can also use the Soul instead of a counterblast like Ascendance Assault. So that kind of helps with that in one of the lists I saw. And also they play Area Stiller, which is the one that generates a protect marker too. So you kind of have that extra defensive aspect to it. But I mean, you still play like draw PGs and the Sanctitude, and you can still fall back on the what's the card that lets you draw? Overwhelm.
Which one?
Overwhelm.
Overwhelm. Yeah, Overwhelms too. But like then again, like the strongest parts like to that deck is truly our Blister and Sweet Cocktail. Like those cards in the main deck are honestly like super crazy.
Yeah, they still play those cards too. They had a 3-1 ratio with the Blisters too. So 3 for the V series and then 1 of the G series essentially. Lastly, do you want to say anything about Darkface specific type of builds or
Darkface specific kind of builds? It's weird just because now the premium meta is shifting again. So you kind of saw this rise, fall, climb back, drop again, and then like you see these one sneaks of Ghidorah, like and again like Vietnam kind of being this outlier. because past initial the Toronto BCS, you haven't seen a high volume of Mega Colony top. And that's just because like control really shines in a unsolved meta, because then people just kind of play into it weird, and then you're able to play like really good general cards to beat just a format in general. Once you start seeing like the best decks, of course Narukami came about like immediately after, because everyone was like, oh, everyone and their mother's playing Gridora. Narukami's free against that deck. So we keep Gridora from topping, which happened in Rosemont. Like I heard from an event, like there was like 6 Gridoras in top 16. There were none in top 8. So it just that ability, and then we saw like the high conversion in Naru. So like that right there should be Narrows. Should be a telltale sign of like what gatekeeps what from entering the top 8. But Darkface overall in general is like you're really like more control centric, which I honestly like that variant, just because if your opponent commits early, you're able to stun their board, so you get like a pseudo Gridora turn. And it matters a lot in the mirror, your access to that history collection stride, because it's technically another Gridora for you if you went first to do the history collection stride, which is what me and my homie Logan Johnson on Team Kingslayer figured out when we were playing like the release weekend for Bugs, as we were both on it, and we're like, oh, so whoever goes first, we get the history collection stride, which is another Gridora when we start going through. So I end out with the Gridora on top. So that's kind of where like the draw is to Mega Colony. If you think you're going to see mirrors and stuff like in your meta, it's a pretty good pick to go with Darkface.
Gotcha. Thanks for elaborating too, because I know people just see Mega Colony and they think of Gridora like the Great Four, and there's a lot more that goes into the decks.
Yeah, because like
Go ahead.
Yeah, like Darkface itself can just turn off turns. Like if you go into history collection stride, but you're playing against Steam Maidens, and then they try to like set up like their misses. Once they call the card, you can immediately rest it, and it beats out resist. Like I know one of your collaborators with Duke Card Fight like talked about that, is like it dodges resist because it's not choosing it. It just sees the units that called, and then it rests it. That's how that effect works. So. Yeah, it's just there's a lot of more, like if you like more control decks like I do, that's why I gravitate toward it, because in a lot of card games I play control decks, so that's where I just find comfort in just playing the GB2 Darkface variant for Mega Colony for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a good pick. I faced it over so many years. I've played it myself with Duke Card Fight too, so I understand some of the mitigation problems that you guys had over the years. Inconsistent support too, so like things of that nature. But now it's in a very good place to like really shine for what it's worth for the clan.
Absolutely.
So, well, with that being said, that's pretty much all we have for October. It makes a lot of sense too, what we kind of saw with with the different formats. I know standard, we're gonna get set 13 soon eventually. I expect some changes too for V Premium, and I know because you focus on V and Premium, so like for V Premium, we're still getting like V promo. So, do you know when Anj is getting their promo, or did already? Like,
I think it dropped this week because Richard's mailing me mine. So it dropped. So yeah, be prepared for Anj. Be prepared for her to get some more bounce stuff. So yeah, Kagero's and Bermuda's came out this week, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, Kagero's getting their one. Okay, gotcha too. I wasn't like knowing which. I'm waiting for the Genesis one.
I'm waiting for Mega Colonies to get revealed because I want to know what that one does.
Fair enough, because we're still waiting on 2 of them, and one of them is
Mega Colony and Shadow Paladin.
Shadow Paladin. That's right. That makes a lot of sense too. And then for Premium, I think even the V promos have contributed to some premium builds too. I know Thywos was a good one for Premium, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see that with the other decks, especially like Bermuda. Bermuda has so many decks that that V promo can easily like slip in pretty easily.
Neo Nectar's huge for theirs too, even though theirs was like one of the first. The fact that it makes a plant token with Katrina being back is crazy, because you just get a free like 25-30k attacker.
A free beater
for counter blast. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's what we expect for the future metagame. And thanks again hopping on to my channel, Devlin. I appreciate your time.
Of course, always. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, man. And again, for those watching this video, check out his content. Really great. You're almost close to 1,000, bro. So close.
Yeah, under a year. I want to think I'd be here, but I just keep doing me. So if you guys like it, stick around and make sure it's worth, because I love doing this for you guys and talking with all the other wonderful content creators we have here in this game.
Awesome. And you guys watch his content and not subscribe? Subscribe.
Yep.
That does help, believe it or not.
For sure.
Especially once you hit the 1K. Awesome. On to the next one, amigos. Bye.